There's a specific kind of hell that empaths experience, and it happens when the person you recognized at soul level, the one who felt like coming home, the connection that seemed cosmically designed, is building a life with someone else. Not just unavailable, not just distant, but actively choosing another person, posting photos with them, creating memories with them, offering them the presence and commitment and consistency that you never received. You see their happiness and it shatters you in ways you can't explain to anyone who hasn't felt this particular torture, because you're supposed to be happy for people you love. But how do you celebrate someone choosing a life that doesn't include you when every cell in your body is screaming that they're supposed to be yours? If you've ever felt your heart break every time you see evidence of their relationship with someone else, if you've tortured yourself scrolling through their social media, watching them build the life you imagined sharing with them, if you've wondered whether you're going insane for still feeling connected to someone who's clearly moved on, if you've questioned whether what you felt was even real when they seem so happy with another person, if you've been trapped between wanting them to be happy and wanting them to realize they're with the wrong person, if you felt like you're in a psychological prison where you can't move forward because you're still energetically tied to someone who's building a future without you, then what I'm about to share will transform everything you understand about why this hurts so profoundly and what it's actually asking you to face. Carl Jung discovered something that will completely change how you see this impossible situation. After decades of studying the deepest layers of human consciousness, he found that the specific agony of watching your twin flame be with someone else isn't just about jealousy or loss or unrequited love. It's about what he called the shattering of the divine syzygy fantasy, the psychological collapse that happens when reality definitively contradicts the story your unconscious mind created about this person being your destined other half. Your psyche constructed an entire mythology around this connection, and watching them be with someone else doesn't just disappoint that mythology, it detonates it, forcing you to confront the possibility that everything you believed about this soul recognition might have been projection, that the cosmic significance you felt might have been psychological inflation, that the twin flame narrative might have been your wounded psyche creating meaning where there was only chemistry and timing and mutual wounding. But here's what Jung understood that nobody tells you about twin flames who choose other people. Their choice to be with someone else isn't evidence that your connection wasn't real, or that you misread the signs, or that you're delusional for believing you had something profound. Jung found that twin flame recognition is often completely accurate, that you genuinely did recognize something in them that most people never see, that the depth you felt was real, and the activation was authentic. But recognition doesn't equal relationship. Soul-level seeing doesn't guarantee partnership. Profound connection doesn't mean you're meant to be together. And this is the brutal truth that watching them be with someone else forces you to integrate. You can recognize someone's soul and still not be meant to share a life with them. Jung documented that empaths are particularly devastated by this situation because you don't just see what is, you see what could be. You recognize potential in people that they haven't actualized yet, depth in them that they haven't accessed, versions of themselves that are dormant but possible. When you met your twin flame, you didn't just see who they are now. You saw who they could become, what they're capable of, the heights they could reach if they did their psychological work. And watching them be with someone else feels like watching them settle for less than their potential, like they're choosing comfortable mediocrity over transformative growth, like they're building a life based on unconscious patterns rather than conscious evolution. But Jung would have asked you something uncomfortable. Are you actually seeing their potential? Or are you seeing your projection? Are you recognizing who they could become? Or are you recognizing parts of yourself that you haven't yet claimed? Are you devastated that they're with someone else because they're choosing unconsciousness? Or because their choice with someone else forces you to confront that maybe your perception of who they are was more about what you needed to see than what actually exists in them? If you're starting to feel uncomfortable as you read this, if there's a part of you that's resisting the possibility that maybe your twin flame being with someone else is revealing something about your projections rather than confirming their failure to recognize your connection, share in the comments just one word: seeing. Because Jung believed that the moment you begin seeing your projections is the moment you stop being possessed by them, even though seeing them is one of the most painful psychological experiences humans can endure. The reason watching your twin flame be with someone else creates such specific torture for empaths is because it activates what Jung called cognitive dissonance at the deepest levels of your psyche. You have two completely contradictory experiences happening simultaneously, and your mind cannot reconcile them. On one level, you felt something profound, real, undeniable. The recognition was genuine, the connection was authentic. The soul-level seeing actually happened. Every fiber of your being knows this wasn't imagined or invented or delusional. But on another level, they're with someone else, building a life, showing up, committing, offering consistency and presence and partnership to another person, creating the relationship you believed you were meant to share with them. And this external reality directly contradicts your internal knowing, creating a psychological split that Jung recognized as one of the most destabilizing experiences the psyche can encounter. You can't dismiss what you felt as delusion because it was too real. But you can't maintain your belief that you're meant to be together when they're clearly choosing someone else. Jung found that empaths trapped in this cognitive dissonance often develop elaborate explanations to resolve it. Maybe they're with the wrong person but don't realize it yet. Maybe they're learning lessons with this other person that will prepare them for eventual union with you. Maybe this is karmic clearing or soul contract completion, or divine timing requiring patience. Maybe they're running from the intensity of your connection and settling for something easier. Maybe they'll wake up one day and recognize what they're missing. These explanations allow you to maintain both realities. Your connection was real and they're meant to be with you eventually. They're just not conscious enough to know it yet. But Jung would have recognized these explanations as what he called psychological defenses against a truth your ego cannot accept. That profound recognition doesn't guarantee relationship. That soul-level connection doesn't mean you're meant to build a life together. That everything you felt can be simultaneously real and also not meant to manifest as partnership. The connection was authentic. And it's still not going to become what you believed it would become. Both are true, and holding both truths simultaneously without resolving them into a more comfortable narrative is what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological capacity to hold paradox. Most empaths cannot hold this paradox. It's too painful, so they collapse it into more manageable narratives. Either the connection wasn't real and you were delusional, which devastates your trust in your own perception, or the connection is real and they're just not ready yet, which keeps you trapped in waiting. But Jung discovered that the mature response is neither of these collapsing moves. It's holding both. The connection was real, and it's not meant to become partnership. The recognition was genuine, and they're not your person. What you felt actually happened, and it doesn't mean what you thought it meant. This is the psychological work that watching your twin flame be with someone else is demanding from you. And it's brutal work because it requires surrendering the meaning you gave to the most profound experience of your life. You have to accept that the connection that felt cosmically orchestrated was actually psychologically functional, serving to activate something in you that needed activation, showing you depths you needed to see, forcing growth you needed to experience, but not leading where you believed it would lead. Jung called this the death of the pur or puella eterna, the eternal youth archetype that believes in magical thinking, that interprets intensity as destiny, that mistakes profound feeling for cosmic significance. The part of you that needs the universe to be meaningfully organized, that wants to believe your suffering serves a romantic purpose, that interprets soul recognition as proof of destined union. This part has to die for you to grow into psychological maturity. And watching your twin flame be with someone else is often the experience that finally kills this fantasy, forcing you into what Jung called the confrontation with reality. But here's what makes this confrontation so agonizing for empaths. You're not just losing your twin flame. You're losing your entire interpretive framework for what the connection meant. You're losing the story that made your suffering meaningful. You're losing the belief that your pain was leading somewhere, that your patience would be rewarded, that the universe was orchestrating your eventual reunion. You're losing the hope that kept you going. And without that hope, you have to face the raw reality that you loved someone profoundly who chose someone else, that you recognized someone who didn't recognize you back, that you felt something they either didn't feel or felt and chose not to pursue. Jung documented that this loss of meaning is often more painful than the loss of the person. You can grieve a person, but how do you grieve the collapse of your entire understanding of how the universe works, of what soul connections mean, of whether your deepest intuitions can be trusted? This is existential devastation, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love and connection and destiny and meaning itself. The jealousy that watching your twin flame be with someone else creates in empaths is particularly toxic because it's layered with spiritual confusion. You're not just jealous in the ordinary sense of wanting what someone else has. You're experiencing what Jung called archetypal jealousy, the rage and grief that comes from watching someone else inhabit what you believed was your cosmic position, like watching an imposter play your role in the story you thought was your life. You look at the person they're with and you analyze them mercilessly. They're not as deep as you. They don't see your twin flame the way you see them. They can't offer the soul-level connection you could offer. They're operating on surfaces while you could meet them in depths. They're unconscious while you're awakened. They're ordinary while you're extraordinary in your capacity for profound love. This comparison feels like evidence that your twin flame made the wrong choice, that they're settling, that they'll eventually realize they're with the wrong person. But Jung would have asked you to examine this comparison more honestly. Are you actually seeing this other person clearly? Or are you demonizing them to protect your ego from the implications of their choice? Are they truly incapable of depth? Or are they just different from you in ways your wounded psyche needs to interpret as inferior? Are they really wrong for your twin flame? Or are they actually right for who your twin flame is, rather than who you imagine they could become? Jung found that empaths trapped in this comparison often can't see the other person accurately because seeing them clearly would require accepting something unbearable. That maybe this other person offers something your twin flame actually needs. That maybe they're choosing based on genuine compatibility rather than fear of your intensity. That maybe your depth wasn't too much but also wasn't what they wanted. That maybe you're not as cosmically significant to their journey as you believed you were. This realization is shattering because it forces you to confront that maybe you weren't the protagonist in their story, but a supporting character. That maybe your role was to activate something in them that would prepare them for someone else. That maybe the entire connection that felt so mutual was actually much more significant to you than it was to them. Jung called this the narcissistic wound, the injury to your sense of specialness that comes from recognizing you weren't as important to someone as they were to you. But Jung also identified something crucial about this wound. It's showing you where you were inflated, where you were making yourself more central to someone else's journey than you actually were, where you were creating significance that served your ego's need to be special, rather than reflecting the reality of mutual recognition. The deflation hurts, but Jung understood that deflation is necessary for maturation, that you can't grow beyond narcissistic patterns without having your inflation punctured. The spiritual bypassing that empaths use to avoid this painful deflation is what Jung called the disguised ego, where you use spiritual language to maintain narcissistic positions. You tell yourself they're with someone else because they're not spiritually evolved enough to handle your depth, because they're running from the intensity of your connection, because they're trapped in karmic patterns while you're awakened. These narratives feel spiritual, but Jung would have recognized them as ego defenses, ways of maintaining your sense of specialness and significance rather than accepting the humbler truth that they chose someone else for reasons that have nothing to do with spiritual hierarchy. Real spiritual maturity, according to Jung, would involve accepting that they're with someone else because that's where their psychology led them, that their choice reflects their needs and patterns and growth edge, that you can wish you were their choice without making their actual choice mean anything about spiritual evolution or consciousness levels. It would involve releasing your need to be the most significant person in their story and accepting that you played whatever role you played, which might have been meaningful but wasn't meant to be permanent or primary. The twin flame teachings that tell you their being with someone else is temporary, that union is inevitable, that you just need to hold the vibration while they complete lessons with this karmic partner. These teachings are keeping you trapped in what Jung called psychological purgatory. You're not grieving and moving forward. You're not accepting and building a new life. You're suspended in waiting, putting your life on hold while they live theirs, interpreting every sign as evidence of eventual reunion while time passes, and they deepen their commitment to someone else. Jung observed that people trapped in this waiting often waste years, sometimes decades, believing that any day now their twin flame will wake up and recognize what they've been missing. They interpret relationship struggles between their twin and their partner as evidence that the relationship is doomed. They see signs and synchronicities as messages that reunion is coming. They maintain faith that the universe is orchestrating their eventual coming together. And meanwhile, life is passing. Available people are being dismissed. Real opportunities for partnership are being ignored. Your entire existence is organized around someone who's organizing their existence around someone else. Jung would have called this psychological suicide, the death of your actual life in service of a fantasy life that isn't happening. You're not living. You're waiting to live. You're not present in your own experience. You're emotionally and energetically invested in someone else's experience. You're a ghost in your own life, haunting the edges of someone else's reality. And the cruel irony is that they probably don't even know you're still there, still waiting, still believing, still hoping. The question Jung would ask you is brutal but necessary. At what point does faith become delusion? At what point does hope become denial? At what point does spiritual belief become psychological escape from accepting painful reality? Your twin flame is with someone else. Not temporarily. Not as a karmic lesson. Not as a catalyst for eventual reunion with you. They're with someone else because that's who they chose. That's where they want to be. That's the life they're building. And every day you spend believing otherwise is another day you're not living your own life. But Jung also understood why accepting this is so difficult for empaths. It's not just about releasing this person. It's about releasing your entire identity as someone who loves at twin flame frequency, who recognizes souls, who's been chosen for advanced spiritual curriculum. If this connection wasn't your twin flame, if soul recognition doesn't mean what you thought it meant, if profound intensity doesn't indicate destiny, then who are you? What was the point of all this suffering? What does anything you felt mean if it doesn't mean you're meant to be together? Jung called this the identity crisis that accompanies spiritual disillusionment, when the self-concept you've built around being special, chosen, evolved, aware, has to collapse because reality isn't. Confirming it. You thought you were the kind of person who experiences twin flame union. You thought your depth meant you were destined for extraordinary love. You thought your capacity for profound recognition indicated you were on an advanced path. And watching your twin flame be with someone else is forcing you to question all of these identity claims. To consider that maybe you're not as special as you believed. That maybe your suffering doesn't mean what you thought it meant. That maybe you're just someone who fell deeply for someone who chose someone else. And there's nothing cosmically significant about that at all. This ego death is excruciating, but Jung understood it as necessary for genuine individuation. You can't become whole while maintaining narcissistic inflation about your specialness. You can't mature spiritually while using spiritual concepts to avoid psychological truth. You can't grow beyond wounded patterns while interpreting your wounds as evidence of your advancement. The twin flame fantasy has to die for your authentic self to emerge. The self that can love profoundly without needing that love to mean you're cosmically special. The self that can recognize souls without needing recognition to guarantee union. The self that can feel depth without interpreting depth as destiny. If you're feeling something crack inside you as you read this, if the twin flame story you've been telling yourself is starting to feel less like truth and more like defense mechanism, if you're beginning to suspect that maybe accepting they're with someone else isn't giving up, but waking up, share in the comments what you're ready to release. Because Jung believed that naming what we're letting go of gives us permission to finally release it. And your willingness to question the narratives you've been holding might give someone else permission to do the same. The path forward from watching your twin flame be with someone else, according to Jung, begins with what he called the withdrawal of libido, taking back the psychic energy you've been investing in someone else's life and redirecting it toward your own. This isn't a decision you make once. It's a practice you repeat constantly because your wounded psyche will keep trying to send energy toward them. Keep trying to maintain the connection. Keep trying to influence outcomes from a distance. Every time you check their social media, you're sending energy. Every time you imagine scenarios where they realize their mistake, you're investing in fantasy. Every time you interpret signs as messages about reunion, you're feeding the obsession. Every time you compare yourself to the person they're with, you're draining yourself. Jung understood that these mental and emotional habits are actual energy transfers, actual psychological investments that deplete you while building nothing real. The practice becomes catching yourself in these patterns and consciously choosing to redirect. You notice you're about to check their social media, and instead you check in with yourself, asking what you're actually needing in that moment. You notice you're spinning reunion fantasies, and instead you come back to present reality, grounding in what's actually happening rather than what you wish was happening. You notice you're comparing yourself to their partner, and instead you acknowledge your worth independent of comparison, recognizing that their choice doesn't determine your value. Jung found that this redirection practice is difficult at first because the obsessive patterns have become habits, neural pathways that fire automatically. Your brain has been trained to think about them constantly, to monitor their life from distance, to create narratives about eventual reunion. These patterns won't dissolve just because you decide you're done with them. They require conscious intervention, repeated choices to think differently, consistent practice of bringing your attention back to your own life. But Jung also discovered that as you practice this redirection, something remarkable begins to happen. The energy you were pouring into them starts becoming available for your own life. You have more creativity, more motivation, more presence in your actual experience. You notice opportunities you've been missing because you were so focused on someone who's not available. You begin building something real rather than waiting for something imagined. You start living again rather than existing in suspended animation. This reclamation of energy doesn't mean you stop loving them or caring about them. Jung understood that love, once genuine, doesn't simply disappear. But the love transforms from obsessive attachment into what he called detached compassion, where you can wish them well without needing to be in their life, can hope they're happy without torturing yourself with images of that happiness, can recognize that they matter to you without making their mattering the center of your existence. The grief that watching your twin flame be with someone else creates is multi-layered. And Jung found that empaths need to grieve multiple losses simultaneously. You're grieving the person. You're grieving the relationship that never was. You're grieving the future you imagined. You're grieving the meaning you gave to the connection. You're grieving your identity as someone special enough to experience twin flame union. You're grieving your faith that the universe orchestrates meaningful connections. You're grieving your trust in your own perception. You're grieving the part of yourself that believed in cosmic romance. Jung called this the necessity of total grief, allowing yourself to feel all the layers of loss rather than trying to bypass them with spiritual explanations. You can't heal what you won't feel. You can't integrate what you keep avoiding. You can't move forward while dragging unprocessed grief behind you. The pain has to be felt fully for it to finally release its grip on you. But Jung also warned against what he called grief identification, where you become so attached to your grief that it becomes your identity. Some empaths trapped in twin flame situations start defining themselves by their suffering, wearing their unrequited love like a badge of spiritual depth, using their pain as evidence of their capacity for profound feeling. The grief becomes comfortable in its familiarity, and moving beyond it would mean losing the identity you've built around being someone who loves impossibly, who waits faithfully, who suffers beautifully. Jung found that grief needs to be felt without being identified with, experienced without being performed, processed without being perpetuated. You allow yourself to feel the devastation of watching them be with someone else, but you don't let that devastation become your permanent state. You honor the loss without making loss your home. You acknowledge the pain without making pain your identity. The questions Jung would want you to ask yourself are uncomfortable but necessary. What am I getting from maintaining this pain? How is staying attached to this impossible situation serving me? What am I avoiding by keeping my heart invested in someone who's not available? What would I have to face about my own life if I finally accepted they're not coming back? What fear is being protected by the fantasy that we're meant to be together eventually? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to illuminate the unconscious payoffs that keep you trapped. Jung discovered that people don't stay stuck in painful patterns without reason. The patterns are serving some function, protecting against something more frightening than the pain itself. Maybe staying attached to your twin flame protects you from the vulnerability of trying to build real intimacy with available people. Maybe it protects you from discovering that you're afraid of actual relationship. Maybe it protects you from confronting your own unworthiness wounds by maintaining the fantasy that you're special enough for cosmic love. Jung found that as people begin answering these questions honestly, they often discover that their twin flame attachment was serving as a psychological defense mechanism, a way of keeping real love at a distance while appearing to desperately want it. You can't be rejected by available people if you're not available because you're waiting for your twin flame. You can't fail at real relationship if you're not trying because you're holding space for eventual reunion. You can't discover your own relationship limitations if you're never in relationships because you're energetically married to someone who's married to someone else. This realization is humbling and sometimes humiliating, but Jung understood it as essential for growth. You have to see how you've been complicit in your own suffering, how you've been using the twin flame narrative to avoid things you're afraid to face. This doesn't mean you're at fault for your pain, but it does mean you have more power than you've been acknowledging. Because if you've been unconsciously choosing the situation to serve certain functions, you can consciously choose differently once you understand what you've been avoiding. The integration work that Jung prescribed for people trapped in the twin flame with someone else dilemma involves what he called the development of relationship capacity, building the psychological structures that would allow you to actually be in sustainable partnership, rather than addicted to impossible intensity. You have to examine whether you're actually capable of the kind of relationship you claim you want with your twin flame, whether you can handle daily intimacy and consistent presence and ordinary conflict and mutual compromise, or whether you're only comfortable with intensity from a distance. Jung found that many people attracted to twin flame narratives are actually terrified of real relationship, that they prefer the drama and intensity and yearning of impossible love to the vulnerability and exposure and negotiation required for available partnership. The twin flame story allows them to experience themselves as deeply loving people without having to actually show up for someone day after day, to maintain connection through boring conversations and difficult disagreements and unglamorous daily life. This is uncomfortable to confront because it means your suffering might not have been noble spiritual waiting, but avoidance of authentic relating, that your loyalty to your twin flame might have been escape from the scarier prospect of being truly known by someone who could stay. Jung would ask you to consider whether you've been performing depth rather than building it, whether you've been addicted to the intensity of impossible love rather than interested in the intimacy of possible partnership. If you're ready to transform this experience of watching your twin flame be with someone else from endless suffering into genuine self-knowledge, if you're willing to examine not just what happened to you but what you've been avoiding by staying attached to this situation, if you're beginning to recognize that maybe the real work isn't winning them back but understanding why you're still trying, there's something I've created specifically for empaths working through this psychological territory. It's called Your Pain Was Not in Vain, a Jungian guide to transform the pain of impossible love into self-knowledge and inner strength. It's a 30-day journey designed to help you examine the unconscious patterns that twin flame attachment often covers, to distinguish between genuine soul recognition and psychological defense mechanisms, to develop the capacity for real relationship rather than fantasy connection. If you feel this is your moment to go deeper into understanding what's actually happening beneath the twin flame story, the link is in the first pinned comment. This material exists to support you in transforming this experience into genuine growth rather than staying trapped in waiting. The truth about your twin flame being with someone else is simpler than the elaborate spiritual explanations make it seem. They chose someone else, not because they're unconscious, not because they're running, not because they haven't learned their lessons yet. They chose someone else because that's who they want to be with, who meets their needs, who matches their psychology, who they're building a life with. And the spiritual framework that tells you otherwise, that insists they're just not ready yet, that promises eventual reunion if you hold the frequency, is keeping you trapped in a prison of your own making. Jung would have told you that mature love includes accepting others' choices even when those choices don't include you, respecting their path even when that path leads away from you, honoring their autonomy even when their autonomy breaks your heart. The twin flame concept, when used to deny someone else's clear choice, becomes a form of psychological violence, a refusal to accept their reality because accepting it would shatter yours. Your twin flame is not with the wrong person learning lessons that will prepare them for you. They're with the person they chose, building the relationship they want, living the life that fits who they currently are. And every day you spend believing they're meant to be with you instead is another day you're not accepting reality, not grieving what actually happened, not building your own life with people who are actually available. The question isn't whether your connection was real. It was real. The question isn't whether you misread the signs, you probably read them accurately. The question is whether you're going to let a real connection that didn't become relationship destroy your capacity for real connections that could become relationship. The question is whether you're going to spend your life waiting for someone who's not waiting for you, or whether you're going to finally accept that soul recognition is beautiful and meaningful and also not enough to build a life on when only one person is available to build it. Jung's final insight about twin flames who choose other people is this: the person you need to come back to isn't them, it's you. You've been so focused on their life, their choice, their relationship, their growth, that you've abandoned yourself. You've been living in their reality while neglecting your own. You've been energetically present in their relationship while being absent from your own life. The work isn't getting them to see you. The work is you seeing yourself again, remembering yourself, coming home to yourself, choosing yourself the way you've been waiting for them to choose you. If this exploration has helped you see your twin flame situation differently, if you're beginning to question whether staying attached serves you or traps you, if you're feeling the first movements toward accepting their choice and building your own life, share in the comments what you're ready to reclaim from this experience. Because Jung believed that naming what we're taking back from impossible situations gives us permission to finally have it for ourselves, and your willingness to choose yourself might inspire someone else to do the same. And if this journey into the psychology of twin flames with other people has resonated with your experience, please subscribe so we can continue exploring these depths together, and share this with someone who might need to hear that accepting reality isn't giving up on love. It's giving yourself permission to find love that's actually available. Thank you for having the courage to look at one of the most painful situations empaths face. Thank you for being willing to question the spiritual narratives that might be keeping you trapped. Thank you for considering that maybe loving them doesn't mean waiting for them, that maybe soul recognition doesn't mean destined partnership, that maybe your capacity for depth deserves to be offered to someone who can actually receive it, rather than held in perpetual readiness for someone who's chosen to receive someone else. Your worth isn't determined by whether your twin flame chooses you. It's inherent, constant, real, whether they see it or not. And learning to believe that, to live from that, to build your life on that foundation, is the real twin flame journey. The union with yourself that no one else's choice can shatter. Until we meet again in the next exploration of what it means to love yourself as deeply as you've been loving someone who isn't available.